Welcome to the Common Humanity Podcast, where we're here to have real human conversations. My name is Nichole, and I am taking over, and it's my turn to ask the questions. I'm going to start with the same question you ask everyone, and that is, who are you?
I am so many very, very different things all rolled into one. I am a mom and a daughter and a very individual and a powerlifter and an author and a strength and conditioning coach and a sister, because I get to put that in there because it's technical, but I also bother my little brother a lot for fun because I can. I am someone who simultaneously thinks the world is a dumpster fire, but also believes in the power of humanity. I believe in music and movement, love movement in general. And I think that humans have an incredible power to build the kind of world around them that they want. And I think that everybody is worthy.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh my goodness, my computer is trying to help me and it's not being helpful and it's interrupting me.
This is not a box that you put yourself in yet on here, but like you've talked about being neurodivergent and same. So
Yeah.
there's going to be tons of opportunities for this conversation to go off the rails and in different directions. I mean, I have questions, but let's see if I actually ask them.
I mean, I didn't say, hey, I have ADHD. I did say that I run like, I named like 15 different things that are who I am on any given day. So I feel like people who know neurodivergent would be like, yeah, she's in there. It's also one of the reasons why sometimes when I talk to people, like usually after our main conversation, I'm like, do you have ADHD? Like, I'm not going to diagnose you, but if you haven't looked into it, you probably should. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's go back to, because you're talking about who you are and then got sidetracked for a second, which was kind of the whole point of that was that like, okay, well, that's just once of 2,000 times during this conversation that's gonna happen.
Like,
Okay, so I know I've asked you this before, but I don't know that you've spoken on it. I saw that you created your first episode in January of 2022. What spurred or inspired the start of your podcast?
So in short, I wanted to have more conversations, and I have learned a lot in my life through just having conversations with people. And so I wanted to learn more. And I think that there's a lot to learn through hearing different people's human experience. And there's also the piece of it where, especially through my writing, one thing I didn't note in my who am I? I'm a trauma survivor, abuse survivor, all sorts of super fun things like that. So in my healing process, one of the things that helped me heal was hearing other people's stories that were similar to mine. And that gave me the courage to start sharing my story. And then I thought, conversation, people sharing stories, like creating a platform where people don't have to have like, oh, hey, we're going to talk about exercise today. Oh, hey, we're going to talk about books today. I just want people to talk about who they are and what made them who they are. And in whatever way they want to, because I mean, at this point in my life, I pretty much forgot that I was a trauma survivor, which was probably like the first 30-ish years of my life. And now 5 years later, I'm just like, oh yeah, no, by the way, like I've lived through some shit, but it's not the first thing that comes up anymore. And so I like to let other people lead the conversation sometimes. And there's always times where I'm like, hey, there's something I want to know and I'm going to ask. But a lot of times it's just like, I want to see where this goes. And I think that putting those stories out there can help other people feel less alone, whether it is like whatever topic we talk about that day, exercise or books or being a mom of small children and how you sort of want to run away, but then your kids give you a hug and you're like, all right, I guess I'll stay. like, like there's so much to life. And I think that sharing those stories is interesting to me. And I learned a lot over like 2020 that you can reach a lot of people on the internet. Like it's something I should have known, right? Like it's the internet. But I actually became comfortable talking to strangers on the internet, doing like live readings of poetry and things like that. And I just sort of like got that bug of like, I want to do this more. Like I just want to talk to people, and I don't have to just talk to the people who are in my life day to day. I can, like, I'm one of those people who on Instagram or Facebook, whatever, will sometimes, like, I always read comment sections. Sometimes I'll dive into them. And I like the idea that I can, like, sometimes I've gotten into like some good conversations with people, and now I can be like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? And we can have this full on conversation. And so that's sort of where it was. It was just, I like talking to people.
I love that. It sounds honestly like it was just a selfish move to have more conversations, but you do you.
Exactly.
So what of the conversations that you've had so far, you said that you've learned a lot and that you enjoy having these conversations. What has surprised you? Like, what has been something that sticks out to you that has been surprising that you've learned from someone's story, or something that just stands out in a way that, I don't know, touched you differently?
I think one of the things I've learned in general, and this is something I've thought before, but I've been able to embody it a lot more, is that there is no such thing as truth. That we all have a different perspective of the world because of how we've lived, and being able to talk with people about who they are and where they come from and all of that stuff, I feel like it helps me be more empathetic to people who I don't agree with. Like people who usually get in a conversation like, no, you're wrong, here's the facts, like, let me give you all of my research papers. Now I'm like, okay, you have had experiences that make you feel the way you do about these things. Tell me more about that, because it's okay. It reminds me of a poem I wrote, where was literally based off of a friend who like walked by, was like, oh, like, have you ever wondered why people are so complicated? And I was like, no, I wonder how. And he was just like, what? I was like, man, I know why we're complicated. Like, we're organic computers, they're like constantly like taking in the world and spitting out information and like all this stuff. It's like, I want to know like what is behind that. And it's not why we're complicated, but how we're complicated. And that is kind of what ties into all of these conversations for me.
I love that.
See people as more human, which is the point, is like, we're all humans, we're all fuck ups. we can all have a redemption arc if we choose.
I fully believe that everyone is doing the best that they can, even if it's not what I think is the best that they can.
Yeah.
Still learning that lesson. But okay, so when you interview these people, do you seek out professionals in certain areas, or this is leading, I'm trying to get you somewhere, but how do you find your guests? I know that you said oftentimes that you'll find them out and about or whatever, but do you seek anyone out ever?
There are some people I seek out. I mean, I have emailed my favorite musician and been like, hey, you want to be on my podcast? Which is still a maybe. So I'm stoked for that day to become a yes. Most people though, so like there are some people I seek out where I'm like, yeah, I would love to have a conversation with this person, which is oftentimes, on occasion, it's people who I admire in some way, whether they're, I mean, there are some big names that maybe someday I'll be like, hey, you should be on my podcast, but not for their research, but more like, why on earth did you decide to research that? Because
Right.
that's their human essence is what brought them to all those things. But most people are like, I would say 50% at least of my guests have been people who I've met via like Instagram. So I either start following them or have a conversation with them in the comments and then DM them, and like, which is funny because, you know, business wise, people are like, oh, stop just cold DMing people. And I'm like, it's not a cold DM. I'm not like, hey, can I ask you some questions and try to sell you something? I'm like, yo, you want to talk? Like, I think it'd be sweet if you want to. If you don't want to, totally fine. But I think it'd be cool. And then other people are just like random conversations. Literally, there was a guy I was talking to in the sauna yesterday, and he said something about like him and his friends run a podcast. I was like, oh, I run a podcast too. And I was like, you want to be on my podcast? And he was like, yeah. Like, that's like, it's honestly, anytime I'm in a good conversation with somebody, I probably drop it. And like sometimes people are like, yeah, sure, I totally do that. And then they just like avoid me like the plague. Because they don't really want to be on my podcast, which is fine. And then there's other people who are just like, yeah, like when and where. So
Yeah, I'm gonna do a quick story time. I know this is an interview for you, but I met you through Instagram as well, but not really. It was more in person via Instagram. So I showed up to Breath and Exposure, which is something I frequent. I do ice baths regularly with sauna, and I post about it a lot. And it was the weekend of the USPA Summer Show. So one of the comps, one of the meets, North American Championships. That's what it was. It was, yeah, I remember it now. And everyone was in town. But I mean, I didn't know this was correlated. I show up and I see you there and you're like, oh, I'm a powerlifter. And I was like, what? And then I was like, let me find you. And it turns out we both followed each other already. And it's because we had scoped each other out previously to the competition. So like, I love that. But all of that was leading up to ask you, I get that you are where you're at now, but like, let's dream big for a second. Let's dream like Oprah big. I know that you said that you had your musician, but give me some people that you'd want to interview, whether that be like celebrities, scientists, or like, I want someone who has lived a homeless life, like, what are the gimmies,
Number one, because anytime I'm asked the question, like, alive or dead, who would you want to have dinner with and have a conversation with? Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart all day, every day. That man is brilliant, and I had such a crush on him for a long time, which is still like a semi-crush, but like, I don't know.
He performs interview gymnastics in a way that should be like honored.
Yes. And I just like, I don't even know if I could have a conversation with him. I just want to sit and watch him talk in person. Like, but I just think he's brilliant, and I would love to be able to have a conversation with him. Would be fantastic. I would love to talk to people, and this has two reasons. There's a book I want to write, sort of started writing, but not enough to say that it's anywhere, but about people's different traumas. And I want to talk to people about trauma and their experiences. I want to talk to refugees. I want to talk to people who have faced war. I want to talk to people who have been abused and overcome. I want to talk to people who have been in car accidents. I want to hear different people's perspectives on big T, little t, any sort of trauma, because I'm like a trauma nerd.
It
And
makes
a
you
lot,
smart.
yeah.
Like like I don't mean to be sitting here smiling at the fact that you're saying that, but like you sound like me, and it's so weird because I can't. Which I mean, this is part of the neurodivergent thing. I can't stand small talk, and I talk about this too at Breath and Exposure because we have sauna time and it's sauna talk, and it's like, who are your parents? Who did you wrong? Talk like let's talk about like
Yeah.
what's happened in life. Like I want to get to know you in a real way, not in a superficial way. Like what do you do for a living? Like, and that's partly what inspired me to be like, let me take over your podcast and interview you and finally get to hear from you because I've got questions and I just sit there and get interviewed. I mean, that's okay, but like, when's my turn, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so of the groups in which that you just mentioned and traumas and things like that, is there someone that how do I ask this question? Like I consume content. That sounds so toxic, but the same way, like trauma stuff, I love watching videos from people talk about their stories, like interviewing people on Skid Row, things like that.
Yeah.
Is there anything that has happened in life, not so much in that, but like that you've been able to ask people about, interview people about, that don't allow you to share their stories? Like, are there any, like, what tea have, not trauma tea, but like tea, you know, like what tea have you gotten from people, things like that?
So I usually, before I start recording, I'll say like, hey, disclaimer, nothing is too taboo for me. If I ask a question and you're not comfortable answering, feel free to not answer, tell me, pass, like whatever. No one's ever passed. No one's ever said, no, we're not going to talk about that. There have been some people who have been like, oh, hold on, give me a minute. Let's go. And so those have been some of my favorite conversations because there are some people who, and there's like a level of vulnerability where some people are just really comfortable sharing their story because they've learned to be vulnerable. And there's some people who are like, oh, I haven't even thought of that, let me, like, give me a minute. So, but I don't think there's anything that anyone has ever shared with me. They're like, no, please don't put that out. That's a lie. That's a lie. Well, it's okay. It's not a lie. There was one where somebody was telling a story and they mentioned somebody's name and they were like, oh, hey, I don't know if they want their name mentioned. Can you cut that out? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. But
I mean,
nothing.
The only request I have is that you edit out this black eye that I have going on here. Not to like, again, the ADHD thing, but that's from jujitsu. I didn't get in a real fight. It's a consensual fight. I want to switch gears and kind of, let me pause. If you're willing to talk about trauma, I will definitely go down that path. I figured,
Let's do it.
okay, I think I might be pulling out a string that'll get me there. Let me know if I'm right. What got you into powerlifting?
Well, I've been lifting since I was 12. I worked at a.
You never hear women say this. Can we just pause for a second? How'd you get into lifting at 12?
Well,
I knew I was gonna pull on a string.
So there's the part of like, there was a gym in my junior high, and okay, in junior high, I wasn't the only girl in the gym. I was the only girl in the gym who was there to lift weights. In high school, a lot of times I was the only, like in high school, our summer weights program was designed for the football players, but I was the only girl that 7 o'clock in the morning every day in the summer was there lifting weights. I'll get to the actual answer of your question in a second, but one thing that I like, this story my mom told me in the last year, she was like, oh, now I remember when Coach Schroff, who was the head football coach, was just like, your kid is a really good lifter. Like, you get a really good lifter there. And I'm not talking about Mick, which is my older brother, who was like the star football player. He's like, that's not like your daughter. She can, like, she's good at this. And I don't know if we didn't have competitions when I was younger. I'm assuming we probably didn't because it's still relatively small here anyway. But then I worked in a gym and I had friends whose like stepdad competed, and they were like, did you ever think about competing? And I was like, that's a thing, I can do that. And then I signed up because that's what I do. I'm the type of person where I'm not like, I'm gonna dream and think about all of the glorious things I want to do. I'm like, this is what I'm gonna do. Like, I put my money into it and I'm like, okay, now how do I succeed at that? And then I do all the little steps. But when I was 12, we'll go to the trauma part. When I was 12, I had the idea that, very vaguely, if I was stronger than them, they couldn't hurt me. And them has been a number of different people in my life. Side note to that, I was wrong. You can be stronger than them and they can still hurt you.
You know, I've also learned that lesson. I didn't get into powerlifting to be stronger than the people that had hurt me at the time. It was the kids who had bullied me as a kid. But no matter how strong you are, you can still get hurt by a group of people who are trying to bully you. So I also, it's like you can't outrun your problems, you can't outlift your problems, but it does feel real good to slam some weight. So
yes, it does.
Okay, so I kind of want to go in 3 different directions. That's ADHD. I looked online and your open powerlifting said you didn't start powerlifting until 2021. I feel like that is pretty recent compared to the journey in which you've had in lifting. Is that incorrect?
No, not incorrect at all. I'm a baby powerlifter.
You are, but your numbers are great.
That's because I've been lifting since I was 12. Like,
yeah,
so
I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty jealous about that.
So I differentiate with people. I have been lifting since I was 12. I have been training for like 2 years now. Like, there have been 2 years where I've been smart enough to go, oh, here is a goal. Let me work towards that goal and get better at it. And I've done that with other sports. I played competitive softball growing up and played club softball in high school, or not high school, in college. I still play volleyball. I still do things like that. But I always looked at, like, I always treated lifting as training for something else. And then, like, my senior year of high school, I completely blew out my knee. I tore my meniscus, my bursa, and my MCL. And did not get it surgically repaired because I did not have the money or the insurance to cover it, and let it heal naturally, which was very painful scar tissue. And it took me probably 10 years to be able to lift, like to squat. Like, I want
to see your squat pattern now, knowing you broke all the things and they didn't get to be surgically repaired. Like, do you squat in a normal?
Yeah, and my knee feels better than it did in high school. But also, one of the reasons I got into personal training and coaching, and I focus on youth athletes, is because, and I don't have any ill will towards any of my coaches growing up, but what I know now, I showed like 90% of the signs of disordered eating, of trauma, of abuse, of all of those things. And like, nobody questioned in my high school when I would go to the weight room during my lunch hour and lift for the second time that day. No one was like, oh, hey, it's your lunch hour. Shouldn't you be eating food? And so I overtrained. I underate. Like, I look back and I'm just like, I squatted 235 my, I guess, junior year, because I didn't get to max out my senior year because I was injured. But I squatted 235, which at the time, when girls weren't in the weight room, like, and people weren't training for that, was pretty decent. Like, that's still more than...
pretty decent without all the other things you put in front of it. Just put that out there for anyone who's listening and is lifting 225, 125 even. Like that's okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, keep going.
But I look back at it with what I know now, and I just think if I had known how to fuel my body and how to train, like if somebody had said, hey, there's a way to do this without constantly hurting yourself. Like, I'm just like, oh my God, I would have been such a beast if I ate food in high school and not like cookies at lunch, because we had like these, they would sell warm cookies for like $1, and that's all I would eat. Like my best friend, you could ask her to this day, she would carry snacks with her in like her purse or her backpack or whatever. She was a swimmer. And there were days where she would notice, like, you haven't eaten. And she would like pin me down and force food into me because she's a mama bear like that. And it was just one of those things. So like one of my goals in life in training youth athletes is to talk about nutrition and to talk about sleep and to talk about stress management, because if they can learn that in their prime, like there are some shitty things about puberty, but that is prime growth for muscle building and developing athleticism, because that is what your body is doing. It's growing and it's becoming more adept at its functions. More so for guys than for girls, but we still get some of it as girls. We also get all the other
Teenage
grossness.
boys have no idea how good they have it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's awful to be a teenager. I will say that up and down. However, if all they did was just eat and sleep, I mean, they wouldn't even have to really work out all that much, except for to expend their energy that they just have just whirling in them. They would just be machines.
Right? And that's what like, I've had some of the people I've trained who are like, okay, do I need to supplement with this? Do I need to do that? I'm like, no, right. Eat food. If you like milk, drink milk. If you don't, find something else. And like mostly what I've had to do is say, you don't have to work out that much. Because I had one, he wasn't even a client. He was just a kid who worked at the gym. He was a lifeguard there. And I like stopped him. And I was like, give me, like, write down your workout and then bring it to me, because I see you in here and you are not helping yourself. And he brought it to me and I just started crossing things off. I was like, you're not doing this anymore. Try this. Like, you're not coming in here 6 days a week. You are 14. You don't need to lift heavy 6 days a week. And he's like, oh, but the people I watch, like Eddie Hall. And I'm like, Eddie Hall has a lot of other things going for him than just lifting 6 days a week. Like, which is fine. You people can choose to put whatever they want in their bodies and whatever they need to for whatever they're doing. That's fine. That is a personal choice. Not something I'm ever going to recommend to a 14-year-old. So, but it was one of those things, like he cut back and like he started seeing much more muscle growth and his weights were skyrocketing. And then like he moved across the country, and just a couple weeks ago he sent me a video because he's 16 now and he's bench pressing 225, and he was just like, thank you. I'm like, you're welcome. I'm nerdy and bossy. I didn't give you a choice.
Yeah, but it's nice, like looking back I mean, like any adult has had trauma. I don't care if you've had the best life ever. And the people who act as a pinball machine to help put no over here, and even just something as simple as correcting that early on in life, you're right, like it really will manifest itself in ways that are yet to be known. And it is hard too not to look back at my life and think sometimes like, man, why did no one not smack me in the face and be like, no, don't do this. Okay, so you touched upon it. I'm gonna try to go back and see what else I can get out of it. Try to be stronger than the people who were hurting you. What did that look like? And why were you trying to be stronger than people hurting you?
So there's a couple pieces. So we'll go with the in general of people hurting me. If I look at 7th grade, My dad has a drinking problem. And he was emotionally and verbally abusive. So home life, not great. I was bullied a lot at school because one, I was one of the only like white kids where I went to school. And
In Wyoming?
yeah, so I lived on the south side, which is predominantly Hispanic and
In
horror
Wyoming?
in Wyoming, yeah.
I had no idea. I like literally thought it was a bunch of just livestock and then white people sporadically placed. Wow, sorry, ignorance is real here. I had no idea. Okay, sorry, I'm listening. I just was thrown by the whole "I'm the only white person" comment because I'm like, when in the world are we the only white people in America?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't the only one, but I was definitely the minority.
Sure.
And there were a lot of people who didn't like me because I was weird, which like I have friends who I met in adulthood and they're like, I wish I knew you in junior high. We would have been friends. I'm like, no, you wouldn't have. You would have been like, oh, she's fucking weird. Like, I know I was weird.
Swear I'm talking to myself right now. But I do want to say I think a lot of what you've said touches a lot on the ADHD and neurodivergent thing in terms of being bullied. I'm learning about rejection sensitivity, and maybe some of the things that I felt so strongly as bullying would not be felt as strongly by people who are neurotypical. And so I'm like, okay, maybe that colored in some of my I'm not saying that about you. But there's also I was a weird kid. I was also like on speed. I mean, I'm not on speed, but like the hyperactivity, I'm very hyperactive. And so like, it was just like non-stop. So people were like, oh, I wouldn't know. You would not want to have known me. You would have hated me. In fact, I had a hard time being in my own head at that time. So
Yeah,
no.
exactly. But yeah, so teenagers are mean. And then the other main group that I was trying to escape-ish at the time, like at that point I had escaped them physically, but there was still a mental toll that I didn't even break into until I was 18, 19 years old. Because like it was so interesting thing about trauma. Like when you have memories, your memories have different pieces. So you have the storyline of like the facts, and you have the emotions, and you have the somatic part, like how your body actually feels. And I had the knowledge of things that had happened to me, but I had I had completely shut off any connection to the emotion or how it feels in my body until something triggered it when I was 18. And then like flashbacks started like crazy. But in 7th grade, I had the knowledge that I had been sexually abused by a number of people in my childhood. And what I knew is that no one was going to fucking touch me. And like not in any way. Not just like no one's going to touch me like that. No one's going to give me a hug. No one's going to try to shake my hand. No one's going to bump into me in the hallway. I was a bitch. I was like, if you get near me, like my best friend that I made in junior high was because this is a terrible way to make a best friend for anybody who's listening. She said something to me in the girls' locker room, and like not meanly, she just said something to me, and I picked her up by her throat, put her against the wall until her feet were dangling, until she turned blue, and I was like, oh, I should probably stop. And then like the next day in science, she spoke to me as a human being for the first time, and I was like, why are you talking to me? So I would not suggest making friends that way. But I was very aggressive. I was like, I was a cat with their hackles up at all times. And Like, it's something where now I recognize that that was PTSD, and I was just hyper aware of every single thing that happened to me and reacted to everything. Like, I have friends who have served in the military, and like, or friends' husbands who are like, oh, I don't know about this girl. Then we talk about how when we go into a room, we never turn our backs to people. We know like every single movement that is happening in the room, and anytime a new person enters the room, like, you have just like a micro second of like planning how you would kill them if they came near you, and like, you just know, but you just know what moves you're going to make, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, that doesn't sound
But
like living. It doesn't even sound like you're surviving. It sounds like you're trying to survive.
yeah. But I'm
So
here.
I'm like you. I'm like, that's really where I was gonna go. Is that's like, obviously you've done a lot of healing, and quite honestly, I wanted to pick at something a little bit, but you're not like, it's not so much the way you're supposed to go about it. And what I mean by that is, I've also had alcoholics in my life, and I found Al-Anon many years ago, and it saved my life. And some of the language you've used, I'm like, she sounds like she's a friend of Bill's, or whatever the way to like ask if you've been in the program or not. But all that to say is, like, clearly you've healed in a lot of ways. What were the magic tools that, I say magic, it's not magic. What was the work you did to get through that healing? Because also, before you answer that, that was very interesting to learn the three ways in which you experience the physical, and the way that you can only maybe be in one lane and still have these other two things shut off. That's really interesting. It's also really powerful. I'm wondering how many people are listening in their 60s and have yet to like tap into some of those lanes from things that have happened in their past.
So I'm gonna tangent that into the answer to the question, but in a moment. So the short answer is a shit ton of therapy. But outside of therapy, a shit ton of more abuse in various forms. Because one of the things that is unfortunate about being a human is our brains are phenomenal mechanisms, and they never stop learning, which is the key to how I healed. They never stop learning. But what you learn and what you know is often what you will continue to perpetuate, because the human brain would rather stay in the known discomfort than the unknown. So I always like to say this, especially like anytime I'll hear somebody be like, oh, why didn't she just leave? Like, it's so easy. I'm like, it's not. It's not, because if you're in an abusive relationship, the most dangerous time of the abuse is when you try to leave. It's not easy because somebody treating you with kindness is much more terrifying to your brain than being verbally, mentally, physically beaten down in the way you know what to expect. Your brain wants to do what it knows, even if it is dangerous to you, even if it doesn't feel good. Because what's this saying? A known enemy is better than an unknown friend, or something like that. So that is how our brains are built to work. That is a survival mechanism, because your brain's job, and this is the shitty thing, especially when it comes to mental health, your brain's job is not to be happy. Your brain's job is to keep you alive. And it keeps you alive by noticing the not so great things in life. So if you want it to be happy, you have to teach it to be happy.
Wouldn't you say that? 100% agree with that, and I love that. And I know that. However, I think a big part of neurodivergence is curiosity. And so I think that naturally, I'm never going to victim blame. I totally get that's victim blaming. Why didn't she leave earlier? Blah, blah, blah. But I think that like sometimes the natural curiosity of our brains leads us to seek out those discomforts, especially and in a search for dopamine. Like I'm gonna go try to do this stupid thing, or an impulse or something like that. So I would love to know more, but I'm not gonna because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too deep. Maybe in an offline conversation. Okay. Or would you say that you are still working on your healing journey? Like it's in the past and you're like working on moving forward. Like, what does that look like for you now?
So I don't believe in being healed. I think
I've come to my end of my journey. We are here.
Yeah, I don't believe in being healed because one, we live in a world where, like I said before, I believe in the power of humanity. I also think the world is sort of a dumpster fire. It's beautiful, but not always. So I think it's always a journey. For me, I go to therapy on a weekly basis. Sometimes that therapy looks like, hey, like, what's up? This is what's happening in my life. Oh my God, let me tell you this story. And then the hour's gone and I'm like, oh, well, we didn't get to any of the other stuff. Sometimes it's like, oh, these are the things I'm stressing about and I'm not handling well. Sometimes it's diving into memories that still come up and still bother me in some way or another, which is, so the tangent I was going to go on before. So I've done like standard talk therapy. I then went to cognitive behavioral therapy, which I would recommend to literally anybody because it is just a series of like different questions you can ask yourself when intrusive thoughts come into your brain and learning those coping mechanisms. And so like when your brain is just like, oh, hey, you're like the biggest piece of shit in the whole wide world, don't you think? And then, so like when I go to therapy now, I like talk about the two conversations I have in my brain. I have the intrusive thought that's like, you're the worst. And then I have the other thought that's just like, actually, let's look at the facts. And the facts say this and this and this. And then like they have this conversation. I'm like, oh, okay, we're good. So those are skills that I learned in cognitive behavioral therapy. And then for my PTSD, like deep dive, I do EMDR, which it's eye movement, something or another, which I can never remember. But it's sort of like being hypnotized. It's kind of the same concept, but you watch a light back and forth and you usually have like little buzzers in your hand. And it's fascinating. So essentially what it does is it mimics REM sleep, which is when your brain is open to like growth, and you get your brain in this like relaxed state while thinking about a traumatic event or the pain that you're feeling in your shoulder or whatever it may be. And you go through it in your brain and you open that memory up and you work on it. So like I had memories, like I said, where I had the factual, like this is how this happens. And then I started having flashbacks of things. And then I started feeling a lot of emotions with them, but I wasn't controlling those emotions, but I still didn't have the somatic piece. And so the best way I've ever heard this described is that all of your memories are a file, and you have to have those three pieces in order for it to be filed away. And if any of those pieces are corrupt, your brain will keep pulling out that file and be like, hey, this needs to be fixed. Hey, this needs to be fixed. Hey, this needs to be fixed. And that's what flashbacks are, is your brain being like, hey, there's something missing in this file. We can't file it. Like the interns keep trying, but it's just missing a piece. So when I do an EMDR, I always say that backwards. Is you go through and you complete the files essentially. And the most brilliant thing about your brain is that it to complete those files, it doesn't have to be true. Like I can go and there's some memories where, because I also do parts work, which is phenomenal and really cool if no one's ever done it. If you should try it. Anyway, everybody should try it. But I've gone back to memories and inserted adult self taking care of my child self and interrupting the thing that happened to me. So in my brain, my child self is securely sitting on a couch watching a movie with adult self taking care of her and no longer permanently reliving somebody abusing me. So I've changed, like I literally changed the narrative. So the relaxed memory in my brain is just like, we're good now. Like you retold the story. And so in short, therapy is really good. And
I was like, I feel like I just went to therapy. But I also feel like that also sort of sounds like a microdose without dosing, like
so it has the same effect. So I actually I'll say, Mick, if you ever listen to this or anybody else, my older brother tried ketamine therapy recently for his trauma. So it's the same thing. So ketamine is the one that's like clinically approved to work in its small doses. And he sat there with his therapist and they had like whatever memory they were working on or whatever feeling they were working on. And the ketamine opened up those pathways and he got to think about it in like the 45 minutes or so that it was rolling, and then like it shut down. So EMDR essentially does the same thing, except you are physically like opening your brain, and it's all of it is fascinating.
Yeah, that does. So like I will throw an analogy out there. I love what you said with the filing system. That's really cool. The microdosing, and before we get into this, I'm not trying to say that people should do it. There's all the disclaimers in the world, throw them in here now. But the way that they say that works is that we have our neural pathways that have been formed for years and years and years. And it's if you're skiing, those neural pathways have existed, and those are deep ingrained grooves. And microdosing or tripping or whatever, it's basically a fresh powder, so you're able to go in and ski down and create new neural pathways, and it helps when done with a guided professional, all the things, it can really help do the same thing. I had no idea that EMDR, I don't know if I said that right, was just another lane for that. The way I'd heard it was people like hold things and it does the vibrations. I knew that, but I didn't understand the way that it in your brain.
Yeah, if you think about, so like the vibrations they're essentially distractions, and the light's a distraction so that you can relax enough for your brain to actually open up. So
like not catatonic, but essentially you're entering into like a zone.
Yeah.
I'm glad that was articulative. Oh man, okay. That's cool. This has been a really fun conversation. I really want to dive deep in places, but we don't have the time for that.
We'll just have to do this again.
I know, that's why I was like, do I do it? Do I not do it? Do I do it? Do I not do it? Okay, so would now be the time that I would break out the 3 questions, the card.
Let's go for it.
Okay, so I don't have the real card. She has the real card, but I have pictures of the real card.
I didn't look at the questions either, so.
I love these. I really want to get this game for myself personally, but the first question is, what is the best job or self-employment you've had to date?
Oh, by far easily what I'm doing now. I am a youth strength and conditioning coach and a fitness instructor. I get to move and I get to teach other people how to move, and I get to help people feel more secure in their body and how they move through space, and it is the best thing ever.
I love that. My answer wouldn't be what you think it would be either, in the sense that I work in digital marketing. It's not like the most fulfilling thing in the world. I mean, yeah, sure, I get excited about things, but one of my favorite things that I got to do was last year, my powerlifting coach, left what he was doing as a strength and conditioning coach and now is a football coach and physical ed teacher. I don't know, I'm gonna mess all that up. But anyway, there was a week in the summer where they were doing a lifting camp for the kids and they needed extra hands. He's like, hey, you want to come in? I was like, absolutely. And it was like, there was so many females. It was amazing to have so many little girls training, and then not only, and the guys too. I don't mean to dismiss that. And I made friends with, that sounds real creepy being like, I made friends with a bunch of high schoolers, but like they followed me on Instagram. I followed them back. I get messages from them about them lifting or competing in powerlifting competitions now. So that was just really rewarding, that 1 week working with the kids and interjecting in an earlier time in their lives and being an example of what someone who lifts looks like in 20 years. It wasn't anyway. Okay, cool. The second question is, what would be some amazing adventures to go on?
I want to step foot on every continent. While stepping foot on every continent, I don't want to do it as like a tourist. I want to go live places, even if it's just for a couple months. That's how I like to do things. I have never been ziplining, which is crazy to me. So I need to go ziplining. I was supposed to go ziplining on my honeymoon, but my ex-husband was a big fuddy-duddy and we were in Jamaica and he was like, no, it's scary out there. We can't leave the hotel. And I was like, why the fuck did we come to Jamaica then? So,
I haven't heard the word fuddy-duddy in a very long time.
I'm basically an old lady in a younger lady's body. So,
I have a similar answer. Oh, you're not done. Sorry, keep going.
oh no. Well, my lame answer was best adventures to go on would be adventurous ones. Just seeing things, meeting people, and trying to experience the world that we live in outside of like the four walls that we're used to.
I have similar answers. I hate that that's a theme here, but I also want to set foot on every continent. I actually had a planned trip to Alaska with one of my friends that fell through at the very last minute. Not Alaska.
Antarctica?
Antarctica. Yeah. And it's been on my, so like, I didn't know that you want to go. So like low key later, let's talk about this because
Yes.
it's a very expensive trip, but I do solo travel constantly, but the best place to kill someone is Antarctica because it's international waters. Like there's just so like I'm not trying to get on a cruise ship by myself without, like I need one person, just one.
I got you.
I digress. And also I love traveling by myself because it does open me up to have all these conversations with people who I never would have normally had conversations with. For example, real quick tangent, I was in Ireland for Worlds. It was like, well, I'm over in this part of Europe, I'm going to travel, and ended up in Paris at a hotel, and long story short, ended up in the VIP lounge because of an error and met the CEO of Bayer at the time and got to have a one-on-one conversation with him for an hour without any, like, he let me go in, and I'm talking like, what are your life's biggest regrets? What is this? And then he was talking about business with Trump. I mean, he just let me go in before his bodyguard came up and was like, time to go, sir. So yeah, like that, I would never, like, when in the world would I ever touch a room of people? Like, anyway, so I love traveling.
Which hold on, don't go into that next one. We're gonna dive in real quick. But to bounce off of that, I love solo traveling for the same reason. And like when I travel with other people, so like St. Louis, my plan was to go to St. Louis by myself. And then my mom and little brother were like, we want to watch you. And then my boyfriend was like, can I come watch you? And I was like, sure, guys. And then like I had this plan of just like exploring and wandering. And then I had to felt like I had to entertain people the whole time I was there, which was rough. But like when I travel with people, sometimes they get offended because I will ditch them. I'll be like, all right, I'll be back in 6 hours. And they're like, where are you going? And I'm like, somewhere by myself. Like, and then like I remember we went to New York City for a project in college, and our professors were like, make sure you travel with a buddy. And I wasn't really friends with any of my architecture co-students. But there was one guy who was like shunned by other people because he was weird too, and I was like, well, we can hang out together. And but he didn't want to go out. He was like, New York is scary. And I was just like, yep, okay. And so like one night I got him to go out with me, and because he was like, I'm gonna be your bodyguard. And I was like, sure, guy, you're my bodyguard. And but then like he was just like, I can't do that again. I was like, that's fine. So like every morning before we had to meet for class, I would like, we were staying in Chelsea somewhere in a hostel, and I would walk to Central Park, and I like every day I ate from a different little food vendor because I was in fucking New York City and that's what I wanted to do. And like, so every day I would walk in Central Park and I would do whatever I wanted to do and then show up to class and do what I like. But so you can travel with people and still get a solo experience. But one of the things I think is sucky about traveling with people is you're less likely to start conversations with strangers. Because like my trip to Morocco, I went through like left Georgia, ended up in Madrid for a day, and then had to fly to Morocco. And by that time, I had not had a conversation with someone in like 24 hours. And the poor guy next to me on the plane. That's all I gotta say about that. But you're forced to, like, you can, and maybe I wouldn't have been now because now I have a phone and I could have been like, oh, I don't know who you are. I'm going to talk to people on the internet, which I would hope I don't do. But at the time, I didn't have that option. But when you travel with people, you're naturally going to talk to the people you know. And if you don't have them around, you can strike up the conversation with the president of Bayer or CEO or whatever you said he was.
You're not wrong at all. That's so like I used to live in New York City and I used to spend all my time in Central Park. I lived in Upper East Side. So I would on Sundays, one of my favorite days to go get food and sit in the park and people watch because you can see the most random stuff up in New York. But when I lived there, I lived in the 92nd Street Y and on a floor with 25 other women. And I now in my older age, I go visit them. And it's so fun because like I like to go travel places that I have somebody there. And then I'll like find other places along the way to go by myself. And I 100% have ditched people in the middle of a vacation. In fact, one of my friends left vacation early because we weren't jiving with like what she wanted to do and what I wanted to do. But if I'm going to be somewhere, I'm 100% going to go take advantage of that. And I'm not someone who wants to sit in a bar and drink or like, I want to go see and touch some things.
Same.
All I'm really getting at this is that we should go on a trip together, but you know.
Yes.
And also you're more than welcome to come back to St. Louis. It's not people's typical like city to go to, but there's a lot of things to do here. And it is a big music city as well and art.
I enjoyed it.
Okay, so. This is my favorite one I've seen so far. If you were able to choose your manner of death, how would you die?
Okay, I have a semi joke answer and a more realistic answer, and then probably like the most realistic answer. Semi joke answer is what I tell everybody is I'm gonna go skydiving naked without a parachute when I'm like 95 years old and just like loose skin and like flying squirrel my way down to the ground.
That sounds so great.
Yeah. Then somebody pointed out to me that some poor Boy Scout's gonna find me in the woods splattered all over the place. And I was like, ugh, maybe I should rethink that.
About human anatomy early in life. It's fine.
Yeah. To be fair, if I drop from a plane, there's not gonna be much left of me. So
yeah, fine. Especially naked. There'd be nothing to keep you contained.
Right. The more realistic one, is not super detailed, but it's not actually my plan on how I want to die, but it's my retirement plan, which my retirement plan is to fake my death so that my children can collect on insurance and then wander off into the woods, which would eventually lead to my death because I am not a mountain man as much as I would want to be, or a mountain woman, I guess, whatever. But wandering off into the woods in some respect and just like being with nature until nature decides that I'm not up to the task. Most realistically, I plan on being pretty old. I plan on living for a long time, and hopefully being able to see like some grandkids, maybe, because family is big and important to me, even though my 9-year-old swears he's never getting married and he's never having kids. And I'm like, you are 9. You might be right, but you might also be wrong. But like calmly dying in a bed with family surrounding me, or just getting to the end and being like, I'm good. I've seen enough. Like, we can go now. And that's probably the most realistic one. We'll have to wait and see which one actually plays out, though.
Right. I also am with you. I hope to die like Rose from Titanic, old age in my bed quietly as I pass away. That's probably not going to happen for so many reasons. Let's start with like the world is burning, which is the biggest reason I want to travel. So like, I don't even know if the world's going to make it that long. And I don't mean that hyperbolically, but like, I mean, it takes one Yellowstone eruption for us to gone.
Which, side note, is why I will continue to live in this tri-state area, because if it blows, boom, I'm done. Like, fast. I don't have to choke on ash or anything, just
more realistically, I joke about this, but I'll probably die in a road rage accident. Not because I'm someone who has road rage, it's because I get chased down by drivers in a way that I did not know was possible. I don't know, people are angry and they just come after, like, it's wild. I'm trying to get from point A to point B and the fastest possible. I'm not driving like 100. It's just like, I don't have time for this and I'm not going to slam on my brakes. I'll just go around you. Like, whatever. Like, it's just, you told me no. Okay, cool. I'll go a different way. But people will chase you down. I've had people get out of the car. Like, it's just like, oh my goodness. And people carry guns openly all the time. So like, it's just a matter of time before that doesn't work out well in my favor. I really hope I'm not like manifesting anything here.
Me too. I like you existing, so I will counter manifest that you continue to exist and that doesn't happen.
Right. And I've had a lot of people in my family live to be quite old, so I really see that happening as long as there's no Yellowstone or something like that happening. But okay, so sorry, go ahead.
There's actually the episode that's out this week is with Ian McConnell, and he has a song, which I will share with you personally after this, but there's a line in it that says, we're not gonna kill the planet, we'll just make the planet unlivable for us. So it's like not to like get political, but jumping into like climate change and things like that, people are like, oh, the planet's gonna be fine. We're like, we never questioned. Nature is very powerful. Have you seen the way nature can overtake a city that was a bustling city, and you just take the people away and it becomes nature again very quickly? We're not concerned about nature. We're concerned about the fact that humans are not designed to live at high temperatures. Like, anyway.
You're not wrong. It's also, I joke every time I get in the sauna that I'm just training for hell or the future climate, whichever one comes first. Oh, anyway, that's terrible. Okay, so back to reality here. The question that you always end on is there something that you want to share with the world, or is there what's one last thing that you'd want to put out there? I kind of got that wrong, but anyway, I'm asking that question to you now.
Okay. I would say you have the ability to be whatever you are willing to work for. And I'm going to tangent this to, I was having a conversation with someone the other day and I was like, you're going to get through this. And they were like, oh, do you think I'm going to get through this because I have someone who believes in me? I was like, fuck no. Like, I am not a sentimental person like that. You are going to get through this because your options are to eat shit and start from scratch or succeed. Those are your options. Those are perpetually your options. And you can fall all the way down to rock bottom and climb back up from the top, back to the top again, or you can catch yourself before you hit rock bottom and continue climbing. Like, at the end of the day, like, those are the two options. So you're like, if you have a dream, take a baby step and then take the next one and then take the next one and just focus on what's in front of you, because you have the ability, because as a human being, you are powerful. You are powerful in your speech. You are powerful in your action. You are powerful in the community you create around you. And you have every ability to use that power to build the life that you want. You just have to figure out how to do it. And you have the answers. Nobody else does, because you are yourself more, like, you know yourself better than anybody else on the planet. So no one's going to be able to feed you the answers. You, at some point, you have to go on a journey with yourself to figure that out. So you're capable, and do it.
I love these little things at the end. They're really good little bite-sized pieces of content, no matter how specific or broad that the topic is. It's just a little nugget to take with you. I love that. I don't know if you have a sign off. I don't, because I'm not a podcaster, though. This has been really fun. I'm not gonna lie. If I could interview people, I like this game. It's fun. So yeah, I don't know how to say goodbye to the people I just met listening today. Thank you all for letting me ask the questions. And I hope you enjoyed getting to know your host a little better.
I appreciate it. This is the Common Humanity Podcast. Thank you for joining us for a real human conversation.